feel free to throw any in the chat, things that come up for you. We may get to it, we may not get to it. I know on the original sign up sheet, it said 6 to 8:30, but that's an absurdly long time to be on Zoom. That was a mistake. So we're going to go 6 to 7:30. You have your evenings off. We're going to hop off in about 90 minutes. And I'm going to throw a link in the chat. Or actually, Zach, would you mind throwing a link in the chat? We are also teaching a workshop, a men's workshop in 2 weeks here in Colorado, or 2.5 weeks, called the Uncivilized Initiation. And so Zach's just popped a link in for any of you guys who are interested in coming deep diving into this. We spend about 5 days, not locked in a house, but kind of locked in a house in the outskirts of Colorado, diving into all aspects of men's work, trauma, power, relationship, sex, money, all the things. We'd love to have you there if you feel like it would benefit you. So without further ado, I would love to pass the mic over to, everybody knows who Duey Freeman is, but for the one person who's listening to this, who's like in Antarctica or something, Duey, would you mind sharing a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And yeah, if anybody is so inclined to coming to the initiation, it's going to be over the top amazing. Part of the what we will be inviting you to do when you come is work with horses. We're going to spend a day down where there's about 50 horses. So that's part of the introduction to me. I do a lot of stuff with horses. I've been a therapist now for close to 50 years. I've run a couple of institutes on training and teaching therapists, and live up in the mountains. I'm at 7,500 feet. You can see the trees behind me. My horses are up the hill making a lot of noise. So if you hear some banging against the fences, that's what's going on. Yeah, I've been a college professor for the last 31 years and therapist, and do tons of work with relationship and trauma and post-traumatic growth versus post-traumatic stress. I'm in a wonderful relationship with a woman named Kimberly that is wonderful. And just to share with you a little bit, we probably have some of the same stresses that y'all have. Missing each other periodically, and one of us wanting one thing and the other one wanting another. So, and welcome.
Beautiful. Thank you, Duey. Just one more time. How many years have you been a therapist?
Are you trying to age me?
No. I mean, I was like, well, you must have come out of the womb as a therapist, but I'm just curious.
I started working therapeutically with kids and families in 1970.
1970. And how many contact hours that give you with clients roughly?
About 80,000.
80.
So I'm just getting my feet wet.
Awesome.
Just getting going there.
Beautiful. Thanks so much. Appreciate you being here.
Actually, let me share something. This is near and dear. I spent the afternoon with a woman named Catherine Ann, and I have full permission to speak about this, so there's nothing untoward going on. And Catherine Ann and I worked together with her sister and her brother. About 15 years ago, she contacted me and wanted to, she has written a book. I don't even know the title of the book yet, but her and her brother and sister were involved in probably the most bizarre, intense situation of abuse, both physical and sexual, that I've seen. And so one of the things that's super special to me is that I've been doing this long enough to go through stuff with people and have them come out in amazing ways. So that's one of the gifts of being at this so long. And actually when her book comes out, I'll share it with y'all. It's going to be amazing.
Thank you, Duey.
You bet.
Our man in Hawaii, Michael Gay.
Well, I'll just squeak something in following that.
Yeah.
My name is Michael Gay. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a therapist in private practice. Currently located in Maui. Was in Colorado for 10 years before that. And I started to get involved in the healing spaces. Started doing men's work stuff with Robert Bly and those folks towards the end of their run in 2005. And was at those conferences before they signed off. And started working as a wilderness therapy guide back in 2006. And so did that for many, many years. Went to grad school, worked in addictions and recovery, and have been involved with a number of men's work organizations over the last handfuls of years. And so just getting started out, I guess, starting in 2006 compared to that man up there.
Beautiful. Thank you, Michael. I would love, Dewey, before we kick it over to you and have you talk a little bit about contact, relationship, and intimacy, I would love to just dovetail on something that you said, which I think we should pop the bubble around no one having challenges in their relationship or reaching this point that like, oh, you're a therapist. Oh, you've been doing this for a bit. Oh, we've read a couple books. Oh, I know how to teach this shit. Then my relationship must just be puppies and rainbows and orgasms and laughter and no bad breath and 24/7. And it's just like flitting through a field. And so I think I'd just love to say,
and nobody in our relationship either. We never fart either. No, neither of us.
Seriously. It's how unconscious of our backsides. So yeah, let's just get that out of the way right from the get-go. And perhaps maybe let that be the transition into you talking about contact, talking about relationship, talking about intimacy. And why is relationship challenging, Dewey? Like, why do we go from, God, I just fucking love this person so much. Oh my God, get away from me. Not me personally, but other people with my stature and pink shirts who've been in this chair.
Yeah, that probably never happens in your relationship, does it, G?
It does. So I'd love to, again, I'm popping that. It does. And so why is relationship challenging for us? And why is the relationship challenging for men?
Whoa. So you're really putting me on the spot here.
I'll go next.
All right. One of the things that in all of my teaching and all of my work is and sort of a joke as I've taught is that the answer to 87.5% of the time that I ask a question, the right answer to or response to that is contact. So I'm going to give a little overview here. Contact is, and actually, you know what? If I can find this really quick, I wasn't sure that you were going to be asking me this tease, or I would have literally pulled this up a little sooner. But I've been working on this like crazy. Everything that I do has to do with relationship and what's called I thou. And what that means is that the ability to know that I'm having an experience in relationship and that whomever I'm in relationship is having an experience. And those experiences are often very different and just as valid. Probably the biggest issue in relationship that we have is not fully being aware or allowing ourselves to be aware of what happens to the other person in the relationship, whether it be between Kimberly and myself, or me and one of my horses, or friends. But the whomever I'm in relationship is having just as valid of an experience as I am. And one of the issues is that we don't allow that. Oftentimes we'll have what's called an I-it relationship where we objectify the other, whether the other is a horse or our partner or a friend or those kind of things, which, by the way, the objectification of the other is the core of racism. It's a core of sexism. It's a core of all of those things. When we're really caught, when we really allow ourselves to go deeply into a relationship, we go into what I call an I, thou, we relationship. So there's I'm fully present, whomever I'm with is fully present, and then there's something that where we connect with each other. The biggest thing that causes issues in relationship is lack of contact or breaking of contact. So a lot of what I look at is what do we do to make contact and what do we do to inhibit contact? When we, like one of the questions, for instance, and Traver had sent was something about, it was, you know, my wife and I want to be more connected with each other, but I watch TV and she's on Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what's happening is that there, for whatever reason is going on in that relationship, there's precious little contact in the relationship. So let me read you the definition of contact, because this is ever evolving, just so that you all know. Contact is a moment of present, embodied meeting of another at our physical, energetic, and emotional and or spiritual boundaries. So let me read that again, because that will be hard for y'all to remember, since I can't remember my own definition. Contact's a moment of present. So we actually have to be present in ourselves and in our bodies. So present embodied meeting of another at our physical, energetic, emotional, and or spiritual boundaries. Notice that I did not say intellectual. We do not make contact through being intellectual with each other. When we do make contact through an intellectual process, it's because of the emotional process that's behind the intellectual process. Does that make sense to everybody? So one way to break contact is to be incredibly intellectual. Part of what we're working with is contact is a relatively short period of time. Sometimes it's like a fleeting moment. It's like an eye contact, or I might walk by Kimberly and just touch her on her shoulder as I go by or something like that. The contact, when that becomes predictable over time, that creates connection. When connection becomes predictable over time, that creates relationship. When relationship becomes predictable over time, that creates intimacy. So
can you do that one more time, Dewey? That sequence of the
yes,
last
sir.
three?
Contact, when it's predictable over time. So time's a really big deal here. When contact is predictable over time, that creates connection between two beings. When connection is predictable over time, that creates relationship. When relationship is predictable over time, that creates intimacy. Now, when I speak of intimacy, I'm not talking about sexual intimacy. In some relationships, that is a part of it. In other relationships, it's not a part of it at all. You know, like Michael and Traver and I mean, we've had some incredibly intimate moments, and that's been about as non-sexual as it could be. So just please know that. But the piece about contact, many men do not learn ever how to make contact. And the truth is that a lot of women don't know how to make contact either. It isn't something that's supported much in our society. It's not something that is supported relationally between two people. It's we just literally do not allow ourselves to do that, and many times we don't know how to do that. So that might be a good place to start with what we're talking about. I could talk more about stuff, but that might be a good place to start.
Yeah, thank you, Dewey. And we're going to shift to another question in a minute, and let Michael dive into that one. So the question I got that spurred this conversation, folks, was someone wrote in and said, like, how do I turn around a stagnant or stuck relationship? Like, my partner and I aren't having sex. They didn't say connecting, but it was like, we're not connecting. Like, she watches TV, or I watch TV. She's on social media all day. I miss her. And how do I like do this? How do so Dewey, I would love, in the simplest terms possible, and we'll speak to men specifically, and for a man in that situation, how does he broach creating contact? Is it a conversation first in your world that says like, hey, we're not connecting? Or is it the act of creating contact first, or a bit of both? Would you walk us through like creating contact for dummies? Not that we're saying that's for men, but like for dummies.
Right. Well, first is turn off the TV. That's the first thing.
How does that conversation happen? I'm just putting myself in this guy's shoes of like, does he say it first, or does he walk up and turn the TV off?
If you were walking in, the first thing I would say is walk into your partner and say, look, what's happening between us doesn't seem to be working. And what I mean by that is, I love you, I care about you, and we've lost contact with each other. One of the ways that I know that contact is getting broken is by, I'm watching TV and you're on Facebook. So first step, let's get off of that.
Beautiful.
Second step is, now we have probably 2 or 3 hours, because that's about what we do. We mess around on TV and we flip through shows, and there's American Ninja Warrior, or there's whatever the other shows are. I didn't even know what they are, but and it's like, let's do something that allows us to begin to get to know each other again. Let's do something that allows us to spend enough time with each other to get to know each other again. One of the best ways to do that then, because what I would imagine is whomever the person is that's receiving that will say, okay, what is that? The next piece is to become curious about the other person. Many times what happens in relationships is that, and we get taught this, is it's like, well, I want my needs to be met in a relationship. Well, everybody does. That's why we get in relationships. The best way to do that, if 2 people are here and I'm saying, and I'm going, Kimberly, meet my needs, and Kimberly's going, Dewey, meet my needs, that isn't going to work. If I become curious about what goes on between Kimberly and myself, or curious about what's going on with her, what I'm going to say is, what needs to happen for your needs to be met? And she in turn can say, what needs to happen for your needs to be met? So it's instead of, I want you to meet my needs, it's how can I meet your needs? And one of the other questions is, and this is where I would start, is how did we get here? How did we get to the point to where I watch TV and you're flipping through Instagram? How did we get here? Because that's not how we started. We started with wild and crazy romance, and we were all over each other every 3 minutes. It's like, how did we get here? What happened? And that's going to be a tough question. It's going to be a tough question in 2 ways. One is, I may not want to hear what my partner might want to say to me around how we got here. So if you're going to ask that question, you really need to be ready for an answer. The other piece is do you have the courage and the vulnerability to say from your end, well, actually, the reason I am blocking you out, or the reason I'm blocking contact, is because blank. I'm afraid of this. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to respond to this. But one of the pieces of really moving into this has to do with allowing yourselves to be vulnerable, which in my world is, I will call it creating openings. That's what I call that. So how can you create openings for somebody to step into and make contact with you? That makes some sense.
Yeah, thank you, Dude. I think it's beautiful. Michael, is there anything you want to chime in on, or anything you want to add to this?
Yeah,
Love to hear your thoughts,
I
brother.
think just another way I think of what Dewey is saying is the place inside of us that we relate from. There's a lot of different ways to have that conversation that Dewey's talking about the TV and whatnot. But can you locate the place that's sort of the most human, honest, vulnerable, sincere, and relate from that place rather than from behind the walls or the defenses or the criticisms or the hurts per se. But it's also creating a culture in your relationship where you do that and where you know how to do that. And if you're starting out learning how to create contact, it's scary and it's weird and it's confusing and things can go wrong. But I think the key is creating a culture in the relationship where you can do that, where you're both familiar with coming from that place inside where contact is even possible. Because you could come into that conversation with accusations or resentments or frustrations and charge, and but it really is coming from a place that can be contacted and asking the same of the other person. So that's the way I think of it and feel.
Yeah, can I make an addition to that, please?
Please.
One of the pieces that I would say is get out of the house. I don't know if you can notice sort of around here, there's a bunch of trees, there's a bunch of nature stuff. And as I'm looking at some of the folks on here, I can see trees out your windows. Electronics will actually stop contact. In fact, the people who create the electronics create them in such a way that we become addicted to them pretty quickly. One of the ways to break that is just to say, whether you're in the middle of New York City or whether you're out in the middle of the mountains in Colorado or Hawaii or wherever you happen to be, a 45-minute walk outside in a park or sitting on a park bench would change everything. Even if you don't talk, even if you just sit there with each other and be. If you really want to begin breaking the addiction of the screen, get outside.
Beautiful. Thanks, fellas. I'm going to chime in with just a tiny note before we go to the next question of my advice to guys, especially to men in this situation, is when you broach the conversation, be willing to carry it all the way through. And so I see a lot of times or hear a lot of times where guys will say, they may even start out with contact, with vulnerability, with curiosity. And then it's like they throw the ball over to their partner of, hey, I miss you. And I'm curious why we're here. And tell me why things are going the way they are and fix it. It's like it's real fast to get to the, like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. You handle it piece. So just be willing to stay in the pocket, for lack of a better term, throughout the entire conversation, and keep being curious, keep just stay grounded in it, and don't open it and then expect your partner to take over just because you open the conversation. Be willing to lead it all the way through.
May I add to that?
Of course.
What both of you have said is spot on. there's a difference between staying in the process and trying to fix it. We as men want to fucking fix things as quickly as we can.
It's because
We
we're
wanna
good
get
at
it
it.
over.
Sorry.
And we are good. No, don't be sorry. That's
Yeah.
we're fucking good at it.
Yeah.
It's like I literally can fix anything. I grew up where I can rebuild an engine. I can build a barn. I can put shoes on a horse. I can fucking fix anything. I do stay away from gas lines because I've blown too many things up. I'll stay away from that. But it's like, yeah, and I know what to do, and it's concrete. The idea of staying in a process, and sometimes a multiple day process, not a multiple minute or even a multiple hour process. And I'll be like, this is a bit of self-disclosure. Kimberly and I don't know what just happened, but
What just happened?
I don't know. My whole screen, there's some screen
There we
sharing
go.
broadcasting. There we go.
We're back.
Okay. A thing happened with Kimberly and I maybe 4 or 5 days ago.
Hmm.
And we had spent maybe 2 to 3 hours a day getting through stuff, and we would make progress. And then it would sort of hit a dead end. And it was like, oh, fuck. I mean, we were kind to each other, but it was like, yeah, we're sort of through. And it was literally about 7:45 this morning by the time we finally got through it, maybe 8. And it was because you take little pieces at a time. When you're dealing with issues, it's almost like there's concentric circles. It's like there's an outer circle of like, oh, this is the obvious. And it's like, okay, well, we got that cleaned up. Well, then there's a little bit of inner circle. And it's like, oh, okay, well, fuck. I thought we got it cleaned up, but we didn't. And that's where a lot of people get really themselves really frustrated. They frustrate themselves in the middle of that. It's like, okay, well, we got that cleaned up now. Okay, now we can go jump in bed. Well, it doesn't quite work that way. It's like, then there's another circle, and that's actually the process that has gone on between Kimberly and I this last 3 or 4 or 5 days. It's like, oh, well, here's a circle. Well, okay, here's this circle. Here's this circle. Here's this circle. Then we got to the core of it this morning. It was like, and it doesn't mean that there wasn't connection throughout all of that. It just means that, you get through part of it and there's more, and then you get through another part and then there's more. And it takes that commitment. And when people talk about commitment relationships, I don't think about commitment like in terms of like not having, sex with somebody else. That's not what I think about commitment as. What I think about commitment as is the commitment to stay in it, like Traver's talking, to stay in it until you get through it, instead of trying to get through it, trying to fix it and make it all better when like underneath it's still not good, that there's still something missing in there.
Thanks for that, Duey. Michael, any last thoughts on this before we go to a second or a different direction here?
I think we can circle back to it. That's good for now.
Cool. So here was a great question that we got. And it was a woman asking about men, but I hear in the last 2 years, I've started to hear this question a lot more from men as well. And the question was, how does a woman know when a man is ready for a conscious relationship or a committed conscious relationship? Any green flags you can share? And I'm also then, Michael, going to ask you to switch this to how do people, and I know this is kind of a loaded question, how do we decipher red flags with green paint all over them? So you spent some time in the spiritual community. I've spent some time in the spiritual community. There's a lot of people spouting the right words and saying all the right shit and wearing the right clothes. And yet there's a wolf in sheep's clothing there on both in every gender, however we want to say it. So what are just some good, solid ways you see people navigating their own readiness and readiness for other people.
Are
You
you
know,
Does that make
asking-
sense?
Go, Michael.
Thanks, Duey. I think like any serious undertaking, that people are really trying to test out and build infrastructure. You know, that you can tell if this person's a stranger to conflict. You can tell if they're willing to put some tools on the table. Do they really know themselves? When you do have a conflict, you know, are they really seeking? Do they have some tools that they're putting on the table? I mean, I think it really comes down to that. A lot of people get into relationship and it just goes well until it doesn't. But when shit goes sideways, you can really tell the difference between people who are like no stranger to conflict. It's like, okay, this is happening. Like they expect misunderstandings and confusion and differences to happen. And they know how to navigate that. They know how to ask the person the questions. They know how to take ownership themselves of certain things. They know how to hold like multiple perspectives at the same time. So I think it's just like a fluency with the terrain. And I think there could be a little bit more vetting in terms of like really normalizing that from the beginning, that when people are trying to get intentional and be in relationships with each other, that they don't shy away from friction points or differences, that they ask hard questions, that they actually seek the places where there might be difference in values or in perspectives or worldview. And that people want to know that ahead of time, and people want to get clear about what that stuff is. How are we the same? How are we different? How is that compatible? How it's not? How is it not? So that to me is kind of the hallmark. The people like approach, are we just trying to ride the good feeling wave until it fizzles out? Or are we really trying to build something here? And I think that feels different to me. When people know they're building something, they're not afraid to test the waters or to ask the hard questions or to share the tools that they know and put them on the table. So I think that's part of the green flag department is, are people prepared for what it really takes to build solid connection over time with each other? You know, and instead of being this hyper agreeable, slightly codependent, you know, mushy thing until it can't do that anymore. You prepare from the beginning to navigate things. You're not afraid necessarily to upset or misunderstand. You're willing to clarify things. So you can tell a person who has some fluency in that department, and it takes a certain self-awareness to, and a real faith in doing so. And so that's to me the green flag department.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to ask you. I'm going to ask you the question, but I'm going to pose it in a way that we know that you can't answer it. Everybody's
Michael or
looking.
me?
Everybody's looking to know how they spot a red flag before they're shown a red flag. And so I'm not going to ask you to say like, okay, well, how does everybody become psychic? But I'm curious if there are ways that early on in a relationship, from what I'm hearing you say, is everybody slow the fuck down, especially when the good vibes are flying and and all the right words are being said and everything's hunky dory on, you know, week 2. How do you have people navigate, or how have you navigated early relationship of what's going on inside of you, where you're like, oh, that felt a little off, but oh my God, she's so dreamy, so I'll just ignore it. How do you have your clients or yourself navigate feeling versus the intoxication of early seduction and falling in love?
There's a difference to me between feeling really good and really relaxed. And if I were to try to boil it down to one potential litmus test, it'd be something like that. I think it's very, well, one, it's going to take time. It always takes time. I don't know if, I think it always takes time to really know someone. When Duey ever talks about attachment, we'll talk about how long it really takes to be in the zone. Like it might take 1.5 years or more to really know somebody, to go through some cycles of really understanding. So there's no substitute really for the time component. But when you're beginning, there's all kinds of ways that we surf the good feelings. But I think it's really different when you feel very relaxed with a person. It's not like just, oh, I feel good, I feel calm. There's a way I know inside myself where I feel very relaxed and very myself. There's a type of transparency and honesty that's different than me kind of trying to keep things agreeable and fun and the energy flowing. So that to me, it's an inside thing. It's a felt sense. It's like, oh, that part of me is really relaxed around this person. You know, I'm not depending on keeping the energy up and flowing and exciting, and that's all good too. But on deep level, I'm really relaxed, and that means that there's a certain level of honesty in me and in them. So if I were trying to give a little soundbite, it'd be that the difference between feeling good and feeling really, truly relaxed.
Beautiful. It's brilliant. Thank you. Dewey, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I like a lot of what you said. I like a lot, Michael. The biggest green flag that I would say, and this would be going either way, is if I'm going into a relationship with anybody, what I want to know is that they're willing to go work on their ship because that's their value. Because that's at the core of their value system. So from a woman's perspective, if one of the questions is, you know, how do I know that a man is ready to do relationship or to really look at stuff? It's like the biggest green flag is, number one, the awareness, the man's awareness that they have some shit to work on. And two is that they're going to do that regardless of whether you're in relationship with them or not. They're not doing that to be in the relationship. They're doing that because that's their value. And it could be a lot of different things. It could be a spiritual practice. It could be meditation. It could be therapy. It could be an initiation like we're talking about. It could be some mentoring. It could be, I mean, it could be 1,000 different kinds of things, but it's like, but for the person going, yeah, I need some help with that. And I need some help with that because I need some help with that, not because if I get help with that, things will be better for us. It's true that if I get help for that, it'll be better for us. But that, what I'm saying is the driving force is I need some help with that because I need some help with that. Let's see, I had another thought. I'm trying to remember what it was. I'll have to come back to it.
Can I say a few things, Dewey, and see if it comes back?
Please.
Back around to the first question, Traver, I think about, you know, people struggling in relationships right now. I have to take a page out of Esther Perel's book that we're doing something different with relationship than we've ever done in human history by a lot. The way a person thinks of themselves and relationship and connection and human togetherness right now versus 150 years ago versus 80 years ago is so different. So our need and desire for certain types of containers for a relationship is growing so quickly that we haven't seen it done, and there's not a lot of modeling in the generations before us. So we're having to invent it and make it up as we go. And that's a hard task. Like, we have new requirements for what safety and trust and connection and selfhood and intimacy all look like. And so I think that it's going to be a little bit before relationship culture really catches up with our inner world as people. But like Dewey said, what you can figure out is someone who really knows how to do the work and is willing. Someone who's willing to navigate conflict and navigate difference and repair, and knows what that really means. So everyone's going to have stuff come up, but do you really know how to metabolize it? Do you know how to digest it together? And do you do a really good job at it? And that's the ticket for the long haul. It's like, do they know how to repair, and do they really know how to build? And that's the main ticket.
Yeah, right on.
You can find alignment in all kinds of ways, but to make it work over time, it has to be repairable. Like, it's like a car that comes out and there's no spare parts for it. Like, you need to be able to fix it as it drives. And so no matter how great it looks or feels, if you don't know how to maintain it over time, and even try to make it better over time, then both people are going to be missing out.
Mm.
So
Mhm. Right on.
Dewey, did your thought come back to you?
Yeah, it did. Michael had mentioned the time it takes to attach, and I want to talk about that a little bit, because this is a really big deal. Some of you know that one of my specialties is working with attachment. From conception to about 18 months old, that's the time it takes for us to attach. When with babies being born, babies being conceived, being born, and developing solid attachment. And that's when everything is really good. So it takes us somewhere around 26, 27, 28 months to fully create an attachment. We oftentimes walk into a relationship and think that we're supposed to be attached in 3 months. And we don't work that way. That is not how we work. It takes somewhere between 18 and 27 months to fully attach into a relationship to the place to where there's a solid attachment between the two people. Interestingly enough, that same thing happens with horses, by the way. Like if I bring a new horse in, my expectation is it'll take me about 1.5 to 2 years to really get, for that horse to be totally secure and for me to be totally secure. I don't know why that takes that amount of time. It's just how we're designed. The other piece that I want to add with what Michael's saying is you're right. There's the way that we try and make contact is what's happened technologically in our world right now is, and the changes in technology, our evolution has not kept up with that.
Mm-hmm.
We have not changed as fast as the technology has changed.
Yeah.
We're like scrambling to catch up. So I guess what I would say is don't get yourselves discouraged if you are like 2 years into a relationship and you're going, wow, we're just beginning to get there. Well, the truth is that's how we work. That's not, there's not a negative thing with that. That's how we work. And that's when things are going really well. The other one last piece I'll throw in there is, and Traver mentioned this earlier, is that things are going to get screwed up. For us to truly attach, we have to go through a hard time in relationship with someone and come out okay. And what true attachment is knowing that we can go through a hard time with someone and come out okay. That's it. That's another green light. It's like, yeah, we can go through a tough time, and once we do that, we can be better with each other. That's a really big deal. So I'm not suggesting that you create hard times on purpose, but once you see them coming, dive into them and like cherish the hard times. Cherishing the hard times will be something that will really be good for you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dewey. I think this is a valuable piece given, someone in the chat said, no wonder most of us don't attach. The average dating relationship now is 3 to 6 months.
Right.
And Dewey, I remember I've shared this many times, listening to a Carolyn Mace talk almost 25 years ago, where she said the speed of technology has far surpassed our biology. And that was pre-iPhone. That was, dial-up modem in one room of the house to, that's where technology was. So
yeah,
I feel for all of us. I just say this, I have empathy for everybody in relationship, trying to navigate relationship, and trying to create relationship. I think one of the things that's often not spoken about is that societally, culturally, however we want to name it, every facet is creating more and more challenge, but also feels like creating more and more, necessity is not the right word, but value. Like, I would love to see relationship come back into its heyday, because we need it, because we don't get the nourishment we want out of life through text messages. We don't get it out of one night stands. We don't get it out of 3-month relationships where the first hard thing happened and we're like, fuck it, I'll just keep swiping. And so I really do, I feel for all of us, men, women, and whoever in relationship at this moment. So thank you both for that. I think that's very, very insightful. And Michael, I'm going to just say again, like, what I'm picking up from both of you actually is slow down.
Yes.
Right. Slow down. Let's maybe that's the frame. And maybe that my answer to the question is, you'll know because that man will be willing to go slow with you.
It's great.
And men, you'll know because that woman will be ready to go slow with you. And that's okay. Okay. Another question. This was actually, if I really want to get to this last one, because this is the one.
Okay,
I want to get on this one. I want to get on this one. But someone actually wrote in a really good question that I would love both of your thoughts on as well before we do, which is, how do you navigate in a partnership where one person's saying like, hey, I think there's a root cause here, and these fights and squabbles and squibbles and arguments are the branches, and you're sitting up here fighting or arguing back and forth about the he said, I said, she said. I want to come down here, but the one partner is not willing to come down here. What would be your guys' insight, advice, guidance in that situation? Either one of you, feel free.
You want to go first too? Okay. I personally think you have to, but if the question is, what do you do if someone won't? It's hard. This one's really hard without context. It's really hard without context. Because I definitely believe in a culture of relationship where people are willing to look at those kinds of things. Even if they don't believe it has an effect, I think that it does more for the partnership to be willing to look at it and try to look at it than not. Any kind of like full-on heel dug in experience, like, I'm not going to entertain that. I'm not going to look at that. Because I think what it communicates to your partner is like, I don't trust you. Like, you're not seeing it accurately. And it just feels like a standoff. I think that there has to be the kind of trust in a partnership where both people are willing to do uncomfortable shit for each other at their request to some degree, to really be willing to look at stuff and to be open. I think it just takes that. I think those heel dug in experiences really erode partnership over time. And in the vein of Stantatkin, like, it probably causes more issues in the long run to refuse to look at something than to just say like, okay, sure. If it's important to you and you really feel like, let's look at it and I'll try. Because you're going to spend more time and energy wasted fighting and arguing over it, and more rupture between you two, than just giving it a shot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're the hawk.
Yeah.
When any of us say that no, that's not it, I'm not willing to do this, we are doing that for the purpose of protecting something, whatever that something is. When that is happening and the other person is saying, well, go do this, go do this, go do this, all that does is make us more protective. And it usually comes out in defensiveness and arguing and sometimes being depressed, sometimes being angry, those kind of things. If I ask my partner or say to her, sweetie, what protection do you need? How can I help you protect yourself? Versus, by God, you better do it. You're going to get somewhere.
Mm.
And it's a really, that's where the we comes in, where it's instead of being like this with each other, you're literally facing the same way, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's what protection do you need? How can I help you do that? And are you willing to step into taking a chance and taking a risk? One of the biggest things that happens is the fear of being vulnerable is the biggest thing that we protect ourselves against. Because if I'm vulnerable, I might get hurt. If we're allowed to, if my partner says to me, what do you need protected from and how can I help do that with you? That'll move things. Because if I'm saying, no, I'm not going to go see any fucking therapist, or I mean, those kind of things, it's like, or I'm not going to see a coach, or I'm not going to see a mentor, whatever those may be, that's a protective process. And oftentimes we'll see it as a defensive process or a resistive process. Seeing it as resistance it doesn't work. And I actually say this around therapy, is a lot of therapists will say their clients are resistant, and I don't buy that at all. All that means is that their therapist doesn't know what to do and they blame it on their client. That's what that means. And there's a difference between saying, even with a client, yeah, I get that you need protected. What are you protecting and how can I help you do that? That's the way to go. That creates the I, that we that I'm talking about.
Awesome. Thanks, Duey.
You bet.
So before we get to the last question, I will preface this question by saying, I remember being at an Esther Perel workshop, and she brought a man up on stage who was a retired therapist, I think probably late 70s, early 80s. And he said, I've been a relationship therapist for, how many decades, and I can sum up my entire relationship, most of my entire relationship therapy practice in this one story, where he had a couple come in and the woman was saying all the things that she wasn't happy about and how they weren't connecting and yada, yada, yada. And then quickly said, pardon me, I have to use the restroom. And so she leaves to go use the restroom, and the guy leans in and goes, I got to be honest, like, we don't really have any problems. Like, none of this is really an issue. I just need her to stop nagging and bitching. So how do we get her to do that? And he said, I can, that's most men in couples therapy. And so I'm using that as a lead in to this next question, which was actually given to us from a woman who said, do you think that our template or our understanding of what makes a good relationship is often based on what women want from a female-centric viewpoint without really understanding what men want and need in a relationship? I sometimes hear women criticize men's friendships because they are not the same as what theirs are. And we also had a couple guys write in and say, how do I get my female partner to understand that me having time with the guys, me doing, my own thing isn't a threat to our relationship? So I'd love to slide this one to you both of, do you feel like, how do we ask this consciously? Do men struggle in relationship because the relationship frame is not set up for men the way it's created right now? I know it's a super loaded question. That's why I'm not going first.
You want to think for a second, do, or you want to jump in?
Sure, I'll think for a second.
Okay.
Or I can go, but if you got something, go.
I do think that oftentimes discussions of relationship and therapy and the couples world is a bit driven more by the female partner and by women and by their needs and by a certain paradigm. And I think that men do have a different paradigm that we could talk about more. I agree with that. But from a couples counseling perspective, if one partner has an issue, then you both do. And that's just, I think, generally how it goes in the couples world. I see two main camps in the couples world. One is like radical personal responsibility, where everyone is totally responsible for their own needs, wants, feelings, emotions all the time. And that's kind of the path through. And another one is a bit more attachment based, like more we space. And I kind of fall more into that camp. So if whoever the partner is the one that's having an issue, then there's an issue. And I think that's just how it goes. But there does, I think it would be great to discuss more of what a paradigm from men might look like, or how to handle conflict or issues or differences, because there ultimately does need to be a middle road. Both parties should probably are going to end up needing to compromise in some shape or form. Their preferred way through something. But that's hopefully a good thing. That's part of intimacy and really getting to know each other and getting really strong together. But I think that would be just my first response is often, yeah, it's the percentage of, I mean, Duey, you tell me, what percentage of women are the ones that reach out for couples counseling? In my world, it's 100%, with occasional exceptions. If someone's setting up therapy for their child or for the couple, it's always the wife in the situation who's reaching out. And so I think that's just like why we see that more often. Women also are the ones who initiate divorces most often. The man's just like, well, you know, I'm fine. If we could just figure this one thing out, it'd be okay.
Right.
There's big differences there. Thoughts, Stu?
Yeah. And I actually, what's interesting for me is it's probably more 60-40.
Okay.
60% of the inquiries come from women and about 40 from men.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. One of the things, actually, I'm going to put a plug in for Allison Armstrong. If anybody would like to really look at some of this from a research perspective, look at Allison Armstrong. About 25 years ago, she was, this is according to her, she was a researcher and she was struggling in her relationship and she decided to research. and some of the stuff that she's come up with is pretty spot on, I think. One of the things that I think that has really stymied relationships is the whole thing that Jung came out with the masculine and the feminine. And that feminine means, you know, kindness and inclusion and creating openings, and masculine is strong and penetrating and et cetera, and that dynamic and that polarity. I don't think that's how we work. And I've run into this and for some of you know or don't know this, I was a professor at Naropa University for 31 years. So a lot of this was spoken there. If someone was powerful, it was, wow, you're in your masculine. And if someone was kind and gentle, it's, wow, you're in your feminine. Whether it was a man or woman. my experience and what I see as shifts, when I see shifts happening in relationships, it's from the perspective of when I see a woman be incredibly powerful and strong, it's a feminine strength. When I see a man be incredibly gentle, it's a masculine gentleness. Men are strong in different ways than women are strong. Both are valid. Both are incredibly powerful. And this is where the I Tao comes in. This is where it's like, when you're strong, how is it that you're strong? What is that for you? And vice versa.
Mm.
So, or when you're kind and gentle, it's like, when I'm gentle, I don't want somebody to say, oh, that's your feminine side, because it's not. It's my masculine kindness. It's my masculine gentleness. It's my masculine core power from that place. When I see a woman who's incredibly strong, I mean, and powerful, it's like, I think it's incredibly disrespectful to say, oh, that's your masculine. It's like, I don't see it that way. It's like unbelievably fucking strong feminine. And here's a part of what I'm talking about. Where I live, and we have bears up here all the time. When a mama bear comes by with 2 cubs, and it's like, I'm going, I really need to stay away from that mama bear because I will be ripped apart. That mama bear is not going, I think I'm going to step into my masculine and eat this dude. That is not what's happening. What's happening is that she is in her core and in her strength and in her power. And that's who she is. And that's what I want to respect. And, when I go up top, one of my biggest horses, he's 1,200 pounds. He's a huge male. He's gelding, which means that he's no longer able to make babies. But I mean, he is one of the gentlest beings in the world. And when you go up to him, you're not going, wow, he's really feminine. That's not there. And it's like, I really think that that we have to have a shift and go, how is a man powerful? How are they kind? How are they gentle? How are they supportive? How is a woman powerful? How are they kind? How are they supportive? How are they gentle? And to begin honoring that difference. And at the same time going, they're both incredibly valid, and it's incredibly equitable. And supporting that with allowing people to dig deep into who they are.
Mm.
And I mean, this goes back to one of the first time you and I met, Traver, and I looked at your tenets of be unapologetically male. It's like fucking right on. And what I will say is not only unapologetically male, but unapologetically female and unapologetically. And I do believe that we're not binary. I don't believe that we're binary. It's like unapologetically who we are, wherever we are on that spectrum. And it's like, and to not start labeling it in ways that take away from who we are. And if we can move into that, when I see Kimberly be unbelievably powerful in some places, it's like right on.
Mm.
When I'm incredibly kind, it's like right on. It's both, we're different and it's valid.
Mm.
So that's my take on all that.
Nice. Traver, what stands out to you in regards to this question?
I think that men need to step into their power in the relationship space. And by power, I'm going to define that of first self-awareness of why are you in this relationship? Do you even know? What do you want from this relationship? Do you even know? What do you bring to this relationship? Do you even know? What do you need in this relationship? What do you even know? And I think so many men, a lot of the men I've worked with, a lot of men I meet, the relationship space isn't as interesting to them, right? They want to be out in the world doing the things like business is far more interesting. The gym's far more interesting. And I know this is a loaded thing to say, but I hear it from a lot of men in subtle language is if it weren't for sex, they wouldn't be in the relationship. But then they get caught up in the relationship because other things get activated or the sex goes away, whatever it is. They don't enter into a relationship saying, I've done some inner work. I know who I am. I know what I want. I know what I bring. And so they're kind of this like wishy-washy, lost, go with wherever the wind blows them. I don't know the fuck you want. I'm just like trying to make peace because they don't stand in a heartfelt yet powerful place in the relationship. Right. So it's like if I show up to a game, I don't really know the rules. I don't really want to play. I don't really know why I'm there. I'm going to get run over. Someone's going to deck me. And so I feel like a lot of men are now coming to the awareness that relationship is this thing that will elevate every aspect of their lives and can also bring them to their knees fairly quickly. And so a lot of men are playing catch up. Like, hey, I want to learn about attachment. I want to learn about contact. I want to learn about intimacy. I want to learn about my partner's needs. I want to learn how to communicate. I want to learn how to have hard conversations. Like they're stepping into it. But I feel like a lot of those men are a bit behind. And that's okay. That's just what we've done societally. It's now our time to look at this thing that we're all engaged in with the same level of presence, with the same level of interest, and the same level of engagement that our female, if we're speaking just in a heteronormative way, are engaged in, right? It's like that's the call right now, because we say 8 out of 10 divorces are female led, and a lot of those have abuse in them that we're not talking about here. So if we take that to the side, but 8 out of 10 male suicides come after a divorce or breakup. So like this should be really fucking important to us, not just because of where it may land us if things go inevitably south, whatever the word is, but also because the benefits are there for us as well. So I think it's twofold in that regard. Like, guys, we got to figure out why the fuck we're in a relationship. And how many of us have actually stopped or had a conversation with ourselves first and then our partners to say, like, here's what I'm bringing. Here's what I want. Here's what I need. Here's what's okay with me. Here's what's not okay with me. Here's how I'm going to navigate the things that aren't okay with me, as opposed to just being like, murmur. Right. And a lot of it is societal and cultural. If we look at, look at a rom-com, look at a sitcom. What's the standard frame in a sitcom? You have a very powerful, intelligent woman. You have a dopey, fat, weird, kind of like beaten down dude. I think that idea is self-perpetuated. So a lot of guys are like, I don't care. It's the paradigm that the man spoke of at the Esther Perel conversation. Like, I just need her to stop. I just need her to stop whining and bitching and leave me alone. And I think men need to realize the opportunity that we're being offered, because the nourishment that we're missing, which is why our negative statistics are as high as they are across a number of boards, is because we don't know how to receive the nourishment that is only available through intimacy. And I'm not talking about sex, but just actual intimacy. So I think that's a big part of it, is that guys are slowly waking up to it. This is why we actually have workshops like this, and we don't have to explain them 5,000 times in 5,000 ways. And guys actually get what we're doing. And men need to have relationships with other men. We can go on and on and on about this, but I think, I know we lost Michael for a minute. We need to fucking step in and become engaged in relationships, because even, if we look at our fathers or our grandfathers who had different attitudes about relationships, they were still in relationships. We're still in relationships. Oops, let me spotlight Michael. Sorry about that. Does that make sense? It feels like we've been here all along, but we haven't been playing. So now it's time for us to step forward and step up and really engage in ways that, I think I just fucked everything up. Relationships are as challenging as Zoom sometimes, and guys need to be open to the challenge.
I think you got Michael back. I think he's good.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get a spotlight.
Go.
There we go. Add spotlight. Does that make sense? I feel like I just rambled for a bit. But Michael, I was saying that we're missing out on the fact that it's an opportunity, right? Guys want to be in, a lot of guys, not all guys, a lot of guys want to be in a relationship, but not really be in a relationship. It's like, I don't know. This is just what I'm supposed to do, or it's like, this is my access to sex. A lot of guys, that's their I'm just here for the sex. And they don't
Why do you think that is?
Why is that?
Yeah. Why do you think they don't realize what's there, what's possible? How come that doesn't?
A lot of what you said is modeling, right? How often do we get together and sit down and go, what's really made my life incredible? Why my business has doubled and I'm in great shape and I feel good and I wake up in peace? Because I'm in a relationship. We sit around and be like, how many stats that running back has? Or some other bullshit. We stay at the surface level. So I think it's culturally, it's catching up. Societally, it's catching up. We just haven't also been, it hasn't been in our circle. It hasn't been in our collective.
One of the things that men do is objectify themselves. And I think that might be what you're talking about, Traver, is, there's a lot of talk, and rightfully so, about men objectifying women. Well, when we objectify, we don't really, it's not like, well, I'm going to objectify these three people, but not these three people. That's not how we work. And we objectify ourselves. And like going to the gym and getting buff is depending on how we do it. It can be a relational process, or it can be an objectification process. And the men who are stepping into relationships where they're there for sex and they're objectifying the person that they're with, they are objectifying themselves too. And the first step in that is for men to work on not objectifying themselves. And that goes all the way back to where we started around, who is the man who's actually willing to go, yeah, if I can objectify myself up to yin yang. I work, I make money, and I have a penis. Okay, there we are. It's like, who am I inside? What's my heart and my soul about? So I think we really need it.
Yeah, Michael, I don't think it's also, thank you, Duey. I think God, it's beautiful. We haven't had good examples of this. And something that I think guys gravitate to is it also hasn't been cool. Right? I think we need to make a really healthy, dynamic, conscious relationship cool. The guy's like, see that dude? Yeah, look at him. You see that? He's got a fucking great relationship. As opposed to see that? He's got like a Corvette. Or he's got like a hot babe. Like it's like
got
the
a great
actual
relationship with
he's got
that Corvette.
substance. Like we have to get back to the desire for substance as opposed to just the desire of fulfilling our ego. And I want to add one more point because I'd love to get
Please.
your guys' take on it super fast. I've also talked to 1,000 guys who are like, I'm not interested in relationship because I got hurt in like 3rd grade. Yet I've talked to women who are like, well, I've been in an abusive relationship. Went through this trauma. I went this trauma. And I really am just looking forward to meeting a healthy, conscious man. And I've got like Joe Smith over here, who's like Susie Johnson in 3rd grade. I told her I liked her and she kicked me in the shins and I am not fucking over that shit at all. I'm like, really? You're 44. So there's something too, it seems like about us that like we have one bad experience and we're like, I'm out of the game. Fuck this game. I'll just go, as Duey said, I'll make money. I'll have sex. I'll deadlift. I'm not bagging on deadlifting. Like, that's it. We'll just quit the game. We quit the damn game. So I'm curious too, if it's like, is there something in the male psyche? Like, you guys, this is your guys' realm that says like, I didn't win in 3rd grade, so I can't win anymore. And so I'm out. Or is it, it happened late, even if it was high school, or you're like, I know a ton of guys literally who are like, well, I was divorced 20 years ago. I'm not getting back in that situation again. So how do you do that? Well, I just don't do relationships.
I won't
Take it
get,
away,
I
therapist.
can't speculate entirely, but I do see that. I do see men just creating like a wall, just like boom. Especially there's a way that men are incredibly sensitive, and like you get burned once and then it's just, they don't quite open up in the same way again for a very long time. That is a phenomenon I see for sure. They keep it locked down.
One of the pieces that you're talking about, and I agree with you, Michael, that I think we're talking about here is a level of resiliency. And the biggest piece that is predictive of resiliency is the depth of attachment we have early on in our lives. So here's an interesting piece with this. The primary person we originally attach to is our mothers. That's just biologically, that's what happens. And there are times where there are incredible attachments to our fathers too, if our fathers are willing and able to step in early. The societal push for mothers to attach more deeply to their daughters than to their sons it's there. It's a big deal. And how early the early messages that boys get around attachment and staying with it it's a different process than what happens with girls. And when in 3rd grade, when Sally Jones or whoever, kicks you in the shins, that's not about Sally Jones. That's about an earlier attachment issue. And that's what needs to get looked at. Probably 95% of the people who come in and I work with, and I don't know what I'd like to hear from you, Michael, with this, and for you too, T, because you do a lot of coaching stuff, and I know there's a number of coaches and therapists in there. Is the people I work with have to do with 95% of the people come in with attachment issues. And even the woman I was talking about in the first part of this, Catherine Ann, all of the abuse she went through, all of that led back to early attachment issues. And that's where her resiliency came from. And also rebuilding attachment. So it's a pretty big deal. When men get rejected, or maybe not even rejected, but get cross-eyed with a woman, it's more of a replay of attachment stuff than what women end up feeling, because our first attachment figure isn't with men, it's with women. And we carry a lot of wounds with that we don't look at.
Whoa. I know what I'm going to be sitting thinking about for the next 6 hours, staring at the sky. Michael, you want to,
Sorry, Katie.
you got anything, Michael?
No, I just know it's true. Like I would spend a lot of time working with teenage boys and teenage girls in the woods, and you see it already there. You can see it long before they're really into serious relationships. You can already see the patterns play out in terms of attachment in the way that the younger women would attach and the men would attach. It's very different already. You know, when I was working with the 13 to 18-year-olds, you see it already playing out there.
Yeah.
So it's already in effect before people even get into the serious relationship stage.
Yeah, we're literally in relationship in utero. And we carry, all of us carry what happened there. And, you know, there's 1,000 things that happen there that we don't oftentimes allow ourselves to go back and look at.
Yeah. Yeah. The last thing I would add is that it feels like it's only recently that the entire male collective has been, the idea of permission to go back and work through a lot of this shit has come to the surface, to not even the masses. We'll just say like to the coasts. It's getting in the middle, but I think for a lot of guys, if the option wasn't there, if like, you know what, Susie Johnson, 3rd grade, kicked my shins, and I'm not allowed to work through that. I'm not even allowed to acknowledge that, except sitting at the bar, explaining to everybody else why I'm not in a relationship and I never will be in one. If that was the only paradigm of an outlet I had, it makes sense to me. And so I think also, as that permission to work through things is deepened and also celebrated by men, I was like, hey, you worked through that. Good for you. Fucking proud of you. Good for you.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you. I think that will also shift things greatly.
Big time.
All right, gang. It is 7:32 my time.
Oh.
So we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you, Zach, for throwing the link in again. For guys listening to this who want to join us in August 23rd, I believe is the date, 24th through the 28th here in Colorado.
Yeah, let me give you that for sure.
Yep, it's the 3 of us. It's 4 or 5 days. We have a day with Duey and horses, which if you can experience just to experience, that is absolutely magical. We would love to have you. Women listening, if you know men in your circle or have men in your circle who you can find a way to say, hey, I think these guys may have something for you, please send them our way. This is what we love to do, and this is what we do, but we don't get to do it without a little bit of assistance.
Yeah. Those dates are 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th.
Yep. Awesome. Link is in again one last time. Thank you guys for joining. We love you. Michael, Duey, I look forward to seeing you guys in just a couple of days. Can't wait to hug you both and dive into this. Cheers, folks. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
See ya.